The fluorescent lights of Bayview Trauma Center hummed the same way they had for the past 6 years of Maya Bennett's career, steady, indifferent, unaware of the storms that walked through the emergency doors every night. Maya was the kind of nurse people forgot the moment she left the room. She spoke softly, moved efficiently, and never raised her voice even when doctors raised theirs at her. The other staff called her the quiet one, sometimes with affection, more often with a dismissive smirk. Dr. Holloway, the head trauma surgeon, had a particular habit of talking over her in front of patients, as though her opinions were background noise in a room he owned. Maya never argued. She simply did her job, checked her patients twice, and went home alone to an apartment with too many empty picture frames and an untouched paramedic certification she'd earned years ago but never mentioned to anyone. That Tuesday night began like any other, until the doors burst open and chaos rolled in on a gurney. Male, mid-30s, GSW to the right forearm, heavy blood loss, BP dropping, the paramedic shouted, wheeling in a man whose military tattoos were barely visible beneath the blood soaking his sleeve. His face was pale, jaw clenched, eyes sharp despite the pain, the look of someone trained to endure far worse than this. His name, according to the dog tags around his neck, was Ethan Cole. Navy SEAL. Active duty, 12 years of service, 3 deployments, and now bleeding out on a hospital bed because a training accident had torn through muscle and artery in his right arm. Dr. Holloway arrived within minutes, barking orders, already deciding the outcome before he'd even examined the wound. Get vascular surgery on the phone. This arm may need to come off above the elbow, we can't risk losing him to blood loss trying to save a limb. The words hung in the air like a verdict already signed. Ethan's eyes, glassy from pain and blood loss, locked onto the ceiling, jaw tightening, saying nothing, because men like him didn't beg, not for comfort, not for mercy. But something in his expression cracked, just slightly, at the word amputation. Maya stood at the foot of the bed, gloves already on, eyes scanning the wound with a focus no one in the room bothered to notice. She'd seen this pattern of injury before, not in this hospital, but in the years she'd spent volunteering with combat medicine training, a secret she kept because Dr. Holloway had once laughed her out of a trauma meeting for suggesting a technique she'd learned from a battlefield medicine course. This isn't the army, sweetheart, he'd said, and the room had chuckled along with him. She never brought it up again. But she never stopped learning either. Doctor, the bleeding is arterial, but it's not fully severed, Maya said quietly, stepping closer to the wound. If we apply pressure at the brachial point and stabilize before vascular arrives, there's a window to save the limb. Holloway didn't even look at her. We don't have time for guesswork, Bennett. Get the amputation consent ready. But Ethan, through gritted teeth and fading consciousness, turned his head toward Maya, not toward the surgeon barking orders, not toward the noise and panic filling the room, but toward the quiet nurse who had just spoken the only sentence in the last 10 minutes that sounded like hope. Please, he whispered, his voice raw, stripped of all the toughness the uniform demanded. Don't let them take my arm. I still have men counting on me. Please. Something in Maya shifted. 6 years of swallowed opinions, 6 years of shrinking herself in rooms full of people who never asked what she knew, it all collapsed under the weight of one soldier's plea. She looked at Holloway, and for the first time, her voice didn't waver. Give me 4 minutes. If the bleeding isn't controlled and stabilized in 4 minutes, do the amputation. But give me the chance first. The room went silent. Holloway stared at her like she'd grown a second head. But something about the sheer certainty in her eyes, the calm, unshaken confidence of someone who had trained for exactly this moment even if no one ever knew it, made him hesitate. 2 minutes, he said finally. And if you're wrong, Bennett, this is on you. Maya didn't answer. She moved. Her hands worked with a precision that startled everyone watching, applying targeted pressure at the brachial artery, repositioning the limb at an angle that reduced blood flow without cutting circulation entirely, calling for a tourniquet placement that was textbook perfect but rarely used outside combat zones. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't hoping. She was executing something she had rehearsed in her mind 100 times during nights when nobody was watching, times when she stayed after shifts to study trauma cases just so she'd never feel unprepared again. The bleeding, which moments ago looked catastrophic, began to slow. Then stabilize. Ethan's blood pressure, which had been in free fall, started climbing back toward safety. By the time vascular surgery arrived 7 minutes later, the situation had transformed from an emergency amputation into a salvageable repair. The vascular surgeon examined Maya's work, then looked up at Holloway with visible surprise. Whoever did this stabilization probably just saved this man's arm. This is exactly the kind of setup we needed to work with. Holloway said nothing. For the first time in 6 years, he had no sarcastic remark, no dismissive comment, nothing to diminish what had just happened in front of the entire trauma team. Hours later, after surgery confirmed the arm could be saved, Ethan Cole lay in recovery, exhausted but stable, his eyes finding Maya as she checked his vitals one final time before her shift ended. "You didn't have to fight for me," he said quietly. Most people in that room already decided how this would end. Maya smiled, not the practiced, polite smile she gave every patient, but something more genuine, more tired, more real. "I've spent years being told my voice doesn't matter in rooms like that one. Tonight, I decided your arm mattered more than their opinion of me." Ethan studied her for a long moment, the kind of look that carried the full weight of what she'd done. "Where I come from, we don't forget people who fight for us when it counts. You didn't just save my arm tonight, ma'am. You reminded me why some people are worth trusting with your life." News of the incident spread through the hospital by morning, not through official channels, but through whispered conversations in break rooms and hallway glances that had never once been directed at Maya before. The vascular surgeon requested her by name for future trauma consults. Nurses who had never spoken to her outside of shift handoffs suddenly wanted her opinion on difficult cases. And Dr. Holloway, though he never apologized in words, began, for the first time, pausing before he spoke over her, listening in a way he hadn't before that night. Maya Bennett didn't become loud overnight. She didn't need to. She simply stopped shrinking. The quiet nurse who had spent 6 years being overlooked had, in 4 critical minutes, become the reason a Navy SEAL would walk, lift, and fight again with both arms intact, and the reason an entire trauma team learned that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the one who's been paying the closest attention all along. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like Maya's, stories about quiet strength proving louder than any doubt, are exactly what this channel is built to tell. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next incredible story of courage, resilience, and the unexpected heroes who show up exactly when the world needs them most. See you in the next one.